Well, thank you so much for being here, Clarissa. We have just a few questions for you about your educational background and your current career and what brought you there. So take it away, McKenna.
First of all, which college or university did you attend for your undergraduate degree, and what was your major?
So I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and I double majored in women's studies and arts and ideas in the humanities, which was this like general degree. And within that, I had two sub-concentrations in English and Spanish.
What drew you to women's studies?
Um, I during high school took my like senior year writing class was sort of like an American culture-esque class where we did a lot of like nonfiction reading and a lot of like just like theorizing different ways of understanding the world, and sort of like reframed like what we thought we knew about like the history of the US and the role of like sexism and racism and all of that in the construction of that. And so that sort of like piqued my interest in women's studies. And I actually, when I applied to colleges, said that I wanted to be a women's studies major. And my mom was like, okay, whatever that means. Um, but yeah, and so then my first women's studies class was a gender in the law class, and I just loved it so much. Like, I just felt like I came out of every class being like, oh my God, like, just like, I totally didn't know that any of this was true. I didn't know any of this history. And I'm upset that I didn't know it, and I want everyone else to know it too. And so, yeah, so that's sort of what got me interested in it. And then, yeah, and so then I majored in it.
How was having that as your major influence the career choices that you made down the line?
Well, I think when I first graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Like, I remember very clearly in like my women's studies capstone class, like my last class in college, like on one of the last days, like all of us going around the circle and everyone saying what they were doing. And half the people were going to social work school and half the people were going to law school. And I was moving back into my childhood bedroom. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think that I felt like, um very much like I had just learned about all the ways in which like the world was broken, and I like was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to like re-enter into this and like participate in one of these institutions that I know is full of problems and that I know is so messed up. And so I felt sort of like paralyzed by how bad everything was, and like didn't know like what I was going to do about it. And so the first job that I had was I did AmeriCorps, which is like a placement program that puts you like apply to the general program and say like what sorts of things you're interested in, and then it places you in you get to choose like what if you're working in like literacy, if you're working in like education or whatever. And so I ended up working at an like a community center for immigrants and refugees, and I taught ESL. And so I did that for a year, and I learned that I was not a good teacher. And then I learned through that, through like being in the classroom with all these people from like very different lives and backgrounds, that like what I really like to do is to like learn about people's experiences and figure out like why they've had certain injustices happen to them. And so, and I was sort of having that realization alongside when the Me Too movement was like really heating up. And I saw like the role that journalism played in like bringing a lot of these allegations to the surface. And so I decided, and I've always loved writing. And so I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And so then I went to grad school the next year. And then I was a freelance reporter in Chicago for like 2 years. And now I am a reporter at a daily newspaper in North Carolina. So that's the way that I've figured out how to try and do some good with my framework of understanding how systematic oppression happens and who it hurts in specific ways, and trying to uncover that and make sure that people are held accountable when they can be.
So you said you were a cops and courts reporter in Asheville. What are your day-to-day responsibilities, or what does an average day look like for you in that role?
So it varies, but in general, so the role and sort of like the role of reporting on public safety and journalism in general is like at a bit of a transition moment right now, because I think before last summer, a lot of it relied quite closely on the police told me X, and so that's the story, and reporting a lot on crime and running people's mug shots and blah blah blah, all that, which does a lot of harm, and stuff like that is like what made me like extremely skeptical about like going into journalism to begin with, because I think that it sort of like can uphold a lot of really problematic things and do harm. But so I think that right now, like the position that I'm in and that like different newsrooms are having conversations about is that reporting on the police and on the courts like needs to look like a lot more like accountability journalism. And so what I try to do on a day-to-day basis is both figure out if there is like literal news happening, like is there a meeting, like was there a murder, like was an officer fired for shooting someone, or if there's some big thing like that, then I will try and find a story about it, interview people about it, and write about it. If there are not sort of breaking news, things like that happening, then I try and find other stories like within the system. So stories that are about police, like today I was working on a story about like what the use of force reports look like for the Asheville police. And like last week I was like, or 2 weeks ago, I was reporting like on a murder trial and like what the outcome was in there. So yeah, so the days look different, but essentially it's figuring out what's going on inside of these different institutions and what stories are important for the public to know about what goes on there.
So in this position, would you want to tell us, what would you not only maybe want to accomplish, but maybe have already accomplished that you're really proud of in this position?
Yeah, so I think that what I would want to accomplish is that I want people who have really powerful positions like the police and judges and prosecutors to know that someone is watching them and that you can't just do whatever you want, and you have to follow the law, and and if you do something wrong, you're going to be held accountable for it.
So this is kind of a question for students like me that are, looking to the future of what are we going to do when we leave college. What would 22-year-old you think about your current position? And did you ever see yourself in this position? I know we talked about a little bit earlier that, you left college and you were kind of like, I'm not really sure where exactly this is going to take me in life. What is it that maybe you would have said to yourself back then about, finding what the right path for you was?
In college, I did not think that I would ever go into journalism, because I think that for whatever reason, the journalism that I had come into contact with I think that what happened is that with women's studies, right, you have this, you're sort of taught that there is no such thing as like truth in the capital sense. Like everyone has their own different version of what happened, and your experience of what happened and your understanding of what happened is informed by all of your identities and all of your experiences and all of this. Right. And so truth is this very complicated thing. And I saw journalism as this thing that was like very sure of itself and was like very sure that what it was saying was true. And there was like no ambiguity about that. And I found that like, I was sort of like, that's dumb. Like there's no, like, that's not how this works. And so I think that 22-year-old me would be both like skeptical, but then also if I explained to her like what it is that I do day to day, she'd be like, oh yeah, like you like figured out a way to like meld this framework that you got through women's studies and these things that are important to you. You found a way to like meld that into a job, even though there are obviously all these other complicated things around it.
Do you feel like having a major in women's studies has significantly benefited you in the workforce or in your personal life?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that degrees like women's studies and like American culture and like African American studies, all these sort of like new disciplines just really like change everything about the way that you see the world, and like change like your relationship to power and like your understanding of institutions. And it just like, yeah, I mean, I think that it impacts, I can't think of anything in my life that it doesn't impact, you know, like it is so wide reaching. Like it impacts like the way that I look at stories. It impacts like the way that I have like interpersonal relationships, and like when you have conflicts with people and you can just, it just, yeah, certainly. Yes.
And is there any other advice that you would have for undergraduate students like me who are considering or currently minoring in women and gender studies classes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's like a lot of unnecessary pressure put on to like that you need to pick a degree that's like practical, because I mean, I don't really think that my friends who majored in like biology or whatever were any more like employable like on the surface than I was, you know? Like it's all about what you make with your degree. And so you should study what you're interested in and what you're passionate about, and that will inform your approach to work, and it'll help you become a better like member of society and whatever it is that you choose to do. If you study something begrudgingly and you hate every moment of it, you're probably not going to retain very much of it. And so then like, what were all these years of studying and all this money for? I think that it's hard to get a job regardless of what your degree is. So I think that my advice is that if you really like women's studies classes, you should major in it.